ready. I'd like to call the hearing to order. For several months now, the media has been fixated on the role that social media platforms played in spreading disinformation and discord during the 2016 elections. This is an opportunity for each of you to tell your respective stories and, if necessary, correct the record.
The idea being the global town square, the global internet town square, where anybody can go on and voice their opinion, step on their own soapbox and say what they want, it's really hard to pull off. It's really hard to pull off. So this is, I would say the social media companies are right now at a very tricky stage.
This hearing brings up the issue of how important social media is in our society and how we consume information on the internet. It shows how concerned our government is with the security measures these sites integrate to make sure people don't use bots, troll farms, misleading ads, and other methods to sway public opinion in our country's ongoing debates.
And you're competing against new pressures now that you weren't before. I mean, for a while, it was just speed, but now you're fighting for attention on Facebook and Twitter and elsewhere against websites that aren't necessarily reputable. We see this problem with fake news. We're going to hear about it a lot at the hearing today. Because Americans have a hard time sometimes distinguishing one site from another, even well-known brands. You know, New York Times, Politico, Recode.net. It's all competing for the same attention on the same platform. So there are a lot of pressures that we have to deal with now that we didn't before.
They are, as I think many people expected, understanding the limits of that and how they're in the crosshairs of angry people who feel like that maybe there would have been that these companies have too much influence over public opinion and they aren't monitoring their sites well enough.
However, this brings up a deeper issue of what do we as people and members of society value more, security and a sense of safety on social media, or freedom?
I'm also hopeful you'll share with us what your companies are doing to make it harder for foreign actors to use your platform's automated accounts and falsified stories to influence sentiment in the United States.
So what exactly are these social media companies doing to make their services more secure and invulnerable to hackers and fake news?
I think the companies have a responsibility to ensure that their products and services aren't being used to facilitate disinformation, and that includes making sure that the political ads that run on those platforms are coming from the right people.
We announced last week a series of ad transparency steps.
We formed an information quality team focused on looking at both behavior and content and seeing how we could stop bad actors from using automated activity to amplify their message.
A lot of things are automated in terms of the ad purchasing mechanism of Facebook and Twitter. So they've promised to put more resources into manual reviews. That makes sense.
Many of these companies are cracking down on bots, fake news ads, and influencers who aim to cause discourse. They're using more people as a resource rather than algorithms to judge what can be on their site. And they are also updating their policies on what kind of content can be shared. But how much of an impact will this have?
It's hard to say how much effect they'll have. Sort of like whack-a-mole. These countries are really smart. And the Internet Research Agency, which is linked to Russia, that had those fake accounts on Facebook and on Twitter and on YouTube, they were very clever in understanding behaviors, what the conversations were, and how to target people. At the bottom line is their business is about advertising, and they want the more people that are using the site means more advertising revenue.
So with these social media companies updating policies on the content shared on their site and implementing more rules for what's acceptable, what kind of impact does that have on our freedom of speech and First Amendment?
I think social media has changed, indeed, the way we think about freedom of speech because it's really testing our boundaries and our values.
And it's pretty clear that on Facebook there is at least some attempt to figure out if folks are who they say they are and some policy to kick them off if they're lying. But in Twitter, there's really no such policy there. In fact, that's the allure of the service, that you could do it under a pseudonym.
But Twitter has an interesting situation in that the reason why they don't require real identity is because there are, imagine if you are like a Rohingya refugee and you need to mask your identity, but want to communicate to the world about what's happening in Myanmar, then but your life is at risk, and maybe those around you. Twitter allows, anonymity to allow that person to be part of the conversation without putting him or herself at risk.
There was that pretty well-known incident of the napalm girl from Vietnam, from the Vietnam War, where the photo of the naked girl running in the battlefield had been taken down by Facebook without its moderators recognizing the historical significance of it. So you think about that on a larger scale, and you could see a world in which those companies being too heavy-handed would actually cause more harm than good.
Clearly, these social media websites and our government have a lot to take into account when balancing security and freedom of speech. But what can you do as the individual to balance this, to stay safe from fake news and ads, while also maintaining your First Amendment?
A lot of it's on us to make sure that we behave in a way that you individually can feel good about when you go to sleep at night online. Think twice. If it sounds too sensational or crazy, it might be. So check your sources. Be a very educated person about news and be literate about news.
The idea of balancing our safety and freedom of speech on social media is a tricky subject, especially when these companies are just companies trying to run a business. Hopefully, with our government and these social media companies working together, they can balance safety and speech on their websites, truly allowing social media to be the virtual town square.